Stuart, you mentioned earlier on in your talk about the free market and how the free market has been wrongly identified as being the model and the cause of the decline. I've got a question about the free market, and it's about whether there's actually any pushback, because you also said professional bodies, they want exams, they want standards. I've run an engineering business for a lot of years. At one point when I was employing a lot of graduates, I was running remedial English classes. They couldn't write. And the reason they couldn't write is they couldn't think. They couldn't order their thoughts so that they could write. And that skill was lacking. But it wasn't a problem with individuals, because we could correct it. We could teach them and they would end up writing really well. So it wasn't that they didn't have the ability, the innate ability to do it, but they'd obviously never done this. And there was one chap that he invited me to his wedding, bless his little heart, and his mother was hugely proud of him because he got a university degree and a master's, and she said, sometimes I just look at him and I wonder what he's thinking. And because it was his wedding day, I said nothing, but what was going through my head is, well, sometimes I look at him and I wonder whether he's thinking. And so my question is, my question is there a pushback? Is there information coming from the private sector to say, actually, there's a problem here, what's coming out of the universities isn't good enough, that's a problem for us, we're not able to compete, please do something. Is that happening?
Well, the initially, just in terms of talking about English and so on, right? So I'm just finishing the end of this article, and it says, teachers teach down to these low standards. I mark the National 5 and higher English papers for the Scottish Qualification Authority. And writing, we are instructed, should not be marked down so long as it makes sense at first reading. Incorrect spelling, missing punctuation, including full stops, and flawed grammar should not detract from the mark. It's boom time for high pass rates, bust for standards. The exams call for no rigour, no real learning as such, and the teaching of the course is superficial and formulaic. Students are leaving secondary schools functionally illiterate, and some of them have an A in English. So I think this is a real problem in terms of the English standards of a lot of students are there, and we're just chatting to James before there. I think there's also an additional problem that you have universities, and people now go to university to get a job, and people should go to university to get an education. And I would say 80% of people that go to university at the minute probably don't want to go to university. They want a qualification to get them a job, but I don't think they want to go to university. I don't think they want knowledge. I don't think they want to study. Perhaps not quite that amount, but not a million miles of it. So we've forced kids into a strange situation where they have to go to university to get the most basic job, right? So if you want to work in a bank, they'll say, have you got a degree? If you want to be a nurse, they'll say, have you got a degree? It's the increasing number of jobs now, they say, have you got a degree? So I feel sorry for my students, because a lot of them are not very well educated anyway, and then they come into university and they're not interested in the world or in ideas or knowledge. They just need a piece of paper. Right? And they have to put up with people like me talking about communism, right? And scratching their heads thinking, why do I have to learn about communism? All I want's a piece of paper. So that's a problem. The market, I actually think there is a market problem, or there is a problem with people who think along the lines of the market. So I was talking to a Conservative MSP recently who will remain unnamed for some reason. And he seemed fine. He was saying, no, we're great on this, the Conservatives, we're great on all the things you're talking about. Yeah, we agree with everything, blah, 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 blah. And then he said, I can't remember how he led into the issue. But he said, oh, but I would disagree with you about, it was about a kind of school should be about teaching knowledge. So it's not a good starting point when that starts to be questioned. He says, no, I think, he says, because I'm a business person and I set up a recruiting agents thing, and I think what schools need is to create a curiosity of the workplace. Right? And I went, what? And he says, and it's obviously part of kind of management speak, right? Of what or a strand. I'm not saying all management, but in terms of, in his head, and he kept saying this curiosity about work, create curiosity about work. And I said, well, if you want to create curious people, don't you just want them to be really well educated? Because if you're really well educated and know lots of stuff, it's likely to create curiosity. But I don't think you can actually create curiosity of work, right? It's like, how do I put this bun on top of the burger in a different way? Do you know what I mean? I know but anyway, so that then depressed me, because I think from the Conservative side, you get what I think is moronic, which is just thinking that we need to think about education in terms of labour and skills. And I think that degrades education. So you've got the sort of values loons on the one side, and then you've got this kind of, but either side, none of them are saying, I'm saying, look, do you not understand that education is a thing in itself? Right? There's a lot to learn, right? A lot. And you don't need all this other stuff at school. They're going to be working for the rest of their lives, right? Let's give them a chance to actually learn stuff and push them to learn it. So that probably doesn't answer your market question exactly, but it's a concern I have about the market push in education. But again, just to say, I think that happens because they've lost a belief in education. I don't think it's because there's some genius, really powerful idea about the curiosity of work, because it's garbage. It's just people have lost a belief in knowledge education.
Can I ask a question? Well, make a quick comment and a question. My name's Neil, and I was a head teacher for a very long time, class committed in the Highlands. So I was teaching and a head teacher. But I've also had a 10-year career in higher education. And what I found was, as this stuff that you were talking about, this crap was coming in, I just couldn't contend with it. Now, I'm really into knowledge, but also engagement with knowledge. I just don't want to just teach children as if they're dumb. They just got to absorb it. So they were engaging. But what I'm totally against is this ideology. One thing you've hinted at but not said was regulation. And what I found as a head teacher was, if I didn't follow this ideology and propaganda, they started to say that my school was crap. I'm going to put it bluntly as that because I've had a couple of pints. The point was, I'm saying, no, this school's not crap. And we've got a lovely website and the children are doing all this fantastic stuff. If I didn't think exactly what the ideologues were saying, they said that I'm rubbish at my job. But I'm not rubbish at my job. So what gets me is it's engagement with knowledge. So I have taught in higher ed, but I was teaching with children aged 3 to 12. But I couldn't actually quite grasp what was happening about in the last number of years. So I struggled and floundered because they kept on saying we're rubbish because we're engaging with knowledge. But we're not rubbish. But eventually they just grind you down. So then what the question is really, or observational question is, how do you counter this being ground down by this ideology?
Yeah, well, I think the best thing that we could possibly do is try and set up a Scottish Union for Education. I think that would be a great idea. But seriously, that's what, essentially, the way the world is at the minute, most of the institutions of society no longer make sense, right? So the Conservative Party isn't conservative. The Liberals don't have any liberalism. And Labour Party is, it's like, you don't even have to say it, it's comical. But similarly, universities don't teach, right? Schools don't teach, not in the way. Schools are filled up with politics. It's just almost every institution. The police arrest people for being decent citizens and celebrate people who are being whacked. It is off the charts, right? I watch these occasional YouTube kind of like mouths, comedians and all the rest of it. One of them calls it the upside down world, right? And it kind of is a little bit like that. And this might take 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, who knows? But basically the institutions that exist at the minute, unions is another one, right? I was in my union, the UC, University College Union, until recently, and I hated paying them. Hated it. And eventually when they said trans men are men, trans women are women sort of thing, and that's an absolute, I just thought, well, that's good, that's a useful opt-out. I can completely bail now. But for years, unions have not been collective bodies that historically they have been. They've been insurance agents for people who are nervous about losing their jobs. So you go to them and they'll give you a bit of legal support and a bit of financial support. It's more like a private insurance company than a union, right? There's not collective meetings, not a collective ethos. There's nothing about them that are about like unions. So across the board, we need new institutions, right? So the Free Speech Union, I think, that's a great setup. The academics for academic freedom, good setup. And so what we're trying to do is create a union of parents, teachers, academics, and communities around pretty basic stuff, I think, right? So, for example, when I started kicking off with this, and I thought, what should we think about, and what's one of the issues? And I thought, well, the trans issue is clearly an issue, right? And I didn't even know the extent of being taught in schools, right? So I now know. I get like a nursery teacher who says they culled their books and they brought in Julian as a Mermaid, which is basically a transgender book. So you're now reading a trans book to 3 and 4-year-old children. Hopefully they won't have a Scooby what it's about, but that's not the point. But the trans thing, I think, you could be, if you had a rational dimension to you, but you could be entirely pro-transgender, the whole thing, but still recognise that you shouldn't teach it in schools as a fact, right? Because primary schools are not there to teach children controversial ideas as fact, right? And at the minute, 11-year-olds are taught being transgender, right? As if this is just a unquestionable, unproblematic fact. Now that's bonkers, right? That is really crazy in terms of basic principles of education, which is that you teach facts, right? As solid as you can get. This is a fact. 2 and 2, that's how you spell. Africa is here, that's there. You teach fact. In high school, you could have a debate, right? But it should be a debate. What do you think about the transgender thing, about biological sex? Are there 110 genders or however many, or are there not? Right? That could be a debate. That's fine, right? Knock yourself out. But it's a debate. It's not taught as a debate. It's taught as a factual thing to 11-year-old children. That's shameful at the basic level of educational principle. And I think most people agree, right? So I think that's what I've set this up to try, because I think whether it takes 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I reckon I'm aiming to die at 86, because I'm thinking after 86, it's kind of, it's too hard, It's too hard. 86 sounds right to me, 86 is the new 66, let's say. So I'm thinking 86. I'll go till 86. So I've got just under, I was 57 this weekend, so I've got just under 30 years, right? So I'll give it a go for 30 years because I think ordinary people and decent teachers, parents, communities, agree with me and think this is bonkers. It's just about, we've got to make sure that more and more people know, more and more people come to write for us, help us, fundraise for us, and all of you guys get a little subscription to the Substack. And Bob's your uncle, and you'll be saved.
First of all, belated happy birthday. You're only 2 weeks younger than me, by the way. So it's not so much a question rather than just a plug. With the hate crime bill coming in, everybody knows, and if it does come in as it's presented on the 1st of April, there's an event in Edinburgh on the 6th of April. Don't know where yet, but it's Posey Parker, if you look up, Standing for Women, doing an event. And there'll probably be little badges like these. We've got little hate monster badges. So spread the little hate monster guy around. So, and I just wanted to say, I totally agree with what you're saying, and this is coming into the health service, and it's scary. The level of, what can I say, intelligence, integrity of people coming up as clinicians, other people in the NHS is shocking. So I would say to people, fight this, because we know what's going to happen. Well, it's not good, isn't it? So fight this with everything we've got. It's going to be more difficult with the hate crime bill. So we need to have solidarity, because they're going to go after anybody that dares to speak the truth about anything. So what's next if we don't defeat this?
I agree. I mean, I would just say on that. I mean, I actually think what the health professionals have done is even on another level of sin, right? So teachers have been. That's what they've done at the basic level is wrong, profoundly wrong. But what the health professional has done is in this affirmation. And the WPATH stuff, I mean, people would have followed this. If you haven't seen it, right, I'll forward you WPATH, which is the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, which are the people that basically directing good practice and tell everyone that you should affirm people's transgender nature, right? And the videos come out recently of stuff behind the scenes where you've got these doctors talking to each other saying, yeah, but I mean, they haven't got a clue what they're consenting to, have they? No, not a clue. I mean, they don't even know biology. No, I don't know biology. They don't. I mean, when you're that young, you think you're invincible. You just say whatever. And, oh, no. And have this entire discussion while at the same time affirming and then putting kids on puberty blockers and, setting them on a track while being entirely conscious between themselves that they've got no clue what they're actually consenting to. I mean, it's sinful. It's not just shameful, it's absolutely sinful. So, I think that's true. And I think, I totally agree. I think that the hate crime stuff, I'm not sure if people are conscious of this hate crime act, but I know it sounds mad, but I want them to arrest J.K. Rowling, because when they do, I'm going to go on Twitter and say exactly what she said and encourage everybody to say exactly what she said. Because honestly, I think it could work. I think you could get thousands and thousands and thousands of people just going on Twitter and saying exactly what she said, come and arrest us then, all of us. 10,000 people. Absolutely shocking. Anyway, sorry.
Stuart, thanks very much. I mean, actually, I love that idea of having the I am Spartacus moment around J.K. Rowling. My question is this, and thanks very much for a great talk. Simply on the basis of what you've said and what we generally know, it seems to me that, like so many institutions in our country, the education system is basically broken beyond all possible hope of reform and repair. Therefore, should decent, honest folk simply walk away from it? And given that, what can we do to actually promote and support homeschooling networks? Because I think that, along with health hubs and, food hubs that this organisation is trying to develop itself, is the way forward. So what are your thoughts on
Yeah, I just think it's, I mean, I empathise. I have a slight worry about homeschooling in terms of socialisation, but I'm sure parents are sensible enough to be able to work around that. Although I have met a few kids who've been homeschooled who do feel like they've never met another child. So that's it, but I'm sure that's unusual rather than normal. I mean, I've got a good friend who actually organises collectively with parents, and I quite like that idea. I think that makes sense. But I just don't think it's practical for everybody, especially women work. A lot of women work. People often wouldn't have the capacity to teach their own kids in terms of especially high school knowledge level. So I think we've got to be able to change education. I mean, I would really like it if Scotland had a framework where you could actually set up free schools. And that would be better. You know, that would be a possibility then, because you could set up schools that are based on knowledge, you know, or the principles that parents want, actually. You could just decide this is you could say, well, if you want your values, you can have that. We'll have liberal values and we'll teach knowledge, right? And when they leave, they will understand what the Greeks, the Romans, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the 18th century, the 20th century geography, they'll understand all that, you know? And you can teach them, you know, you can teach them how to dye their hair blue, and we'll teach them that, right? And then it's your choice. So that would be nice. The difficulty is, see, I would like to kind of set up a political party, and if I was going to set it up, I've just changed the name recently because I always thought I would call it Common Sense. And now I think I would call it Common Sense Referendum Party, because the principle of it would be, for major decisions, we need referendums because the public are wiser than the people that are running our institutions. So I like that idea, but it's how that can happen in the way the system's set up politically. So I think there needs to be political change. But politics is changing. And I mean, essentially what we're describing here, even if you don't like the term, is populism. Because populism just basically means people power. And I think that's what you need. And you just need to try and work out how to develop that in every way you can. So whether it's the Free Speech Union, Scottish Union for Education, new political parties, homeschool network that then expands and then creates schools possibly, anything that allows people to have more of a say is the way forward. That doesn't specifically answer it, but I think that's the principle, I think.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for that presentation. Very fascinating to see the insider view. My question, David asked it, so it's kind of almost answered. But I think the thing I would like to say is that I've got an insight now from what you've said tonight, and I didn't, expect to hear all that. But if only people knew, if only parents knew, and they've got no idea.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how to resolve this problem. But I think people are busy with their own lives. And I don't mean that in a patronising way or even in a negative way. But it's how we can, because I think I could say this to every parent in Scotland, and I'm not sure that many of them would then do anything about it. But I could be wrong, which is why actually I've done these leaflets, because I'm now thinking, well, as an experiment in Edinburgh, I'm going to try with a few people in Edinburgh, and I'm going to try and leaflet thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of parents and teachers and just see what happens, right? But most people have a sense of powerlessness, and they have a sense of powerlessness because they're powerless. I know that sounds stupid. It's like my lecturers at work. I get very frustrated because I stand up and attack my principal publicly. I stand up and argue. I stand up and disagree. And there's lots of people around there that I know agree with me, but they don't stand up, right? And the thing is, I might get frustrated by that. But the reason that I think I stand up is that I come from a kind of political tradition, right? So I came from the left, right? And then I still in touch with, people like, I don't know if you know Claire Fox, who's like the Baroness Claire Fox, right? And Frank Furedi, I know him, and all these people that were like left-wing people, but actually were, believe it or not, good left-wing people. And Spiked Online is the kind of website and so on, right? So I know a lot of these people, and that the reason that I think I'm able to be bolshy is because there's a group of us, right? And there's a body of people and a body of knowledge, but people don't have that, right? They're alone, right? And so that's why I think the institutions thing is important, because if you have an institution, by institution I just mean like a union, like what I'm trying to create, that can be something that people go, okay, well, I might not want to do anything, but they're there and I'll keep in touch and I'll have a look, and then they'll get in touch, and then something will happen, right? Something will happen that's a trigger point, and we're already there, right? And I know people, and I know you guys in Edinburgh, I know these people in Glasgow, and I know people in Aberdeen, and suddenly, from nothing, something happens, right? So that's what I'm hoping, because that's how a lot of these things seem to happen, is that from nothing, suddenly there's a trigger point. It's a step too far, step too far. And parents find out about it and they're going, wait a minute. And we're already there, right? And they know of us. And then, that's the hope.
Totally. Now, just to say, all you people that are already educated and have the experience of what's happening now and not realizing how indoctrinating it is and bad for the mind and everything, education and everything. The reason why maybe the trigger that you're talking about doesn't happen is because for a generation we've been used to give our trust to all the institutions, the medical, the political, the educational, and now it's very difficult for people to withdraw and believe in their own sovereignty and believe that they have the power, the duty, the responsibility to do something else. Let the whole system die. It's not worth it fighting it. It will be like a flower that withers and dies by its own self and create something new. Crowdfunding, get a local, start a school, and everybody will flog into it because it will be the common sense, it will be proper education, it will be critical thinking, it will be curiosity, it will be everything that the children want and the parents have got the common sense to kind of promote. And that's it. And you all there, many of you can start it and all the parents will flog. Crowdfunding is the...
Yeah. The problem is I don't think you can found schools in Scotland, as far as I know. I don't think you can set up schools in Scotland. That's the problem.
Why not?
I don't know. Perhaps Matthew can confirm or disconfirm this. But anyway. Sorry.
Oh, it's me, Scott. That's what it is. Just to respond quickly to Neil's point there, how we, not how you personally, but how we prevent ourselves getting ground down by this, it's by finding common cause with people like us, where we find that we share a mindset and we share an objective and we're realistic about it. So I think that's it, because we come here, we have a laugh, we learn things, and we know we're not alone. Because your experience, Neil, is the same for every single person in this room until we met each other. So please keep coming. Anyway, that was two. And just briefly before I make my point, Stuart, I concur with your take on it. I think it's very wise to see this as almost like a multi-generational project. I mean, I know you've been somewhat tongue-in-cheek by saying you're working to 86, and I hope you can. But I think that's how to think of it. Because if we think we're going to address this in like 2 years or 5 years, this has been a long time coming, and it's going to be a long time getting rid of it. And our whole children have been turned against us. So that's again a generational project. So I think if you start off realistic in terms of the goals and the length of this project, I think it helps you keep on a level track. in a way. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, the main point I was wanting to make is that the trends you've observed and the concerns you've raised, which led you to found the Scottish Union of Education, have been observed by many parents over the last generation, in particular over the last 10 years, and certainly the last 5 years. But although they could see what was happening, none of them did anything other than just talking, and you did. So I want you to know that I'm saluting, and I think everyone else does, your moral courage, because you're going to go against very powerful forces here. I mean, you know that, right? And I want you to know I respect that, and I'm looking to that. That's what leadership is. So I don't mean that to sound patronising, Stuart,
No,
but maybe
it sounds great. More praise.
Yeah,
I'll take the praise. Bring it on.
Then give me that $5 later.
I will. I'll buy you a pint.
But the other thing was actually a question that relates to that, you know, and you maybe partially addressed it. And you seem like a maverick, right? And you know how there's that phrase, when you see a child, you can see the adult in them. And the same goes for reverse. You see the adult, and I'm just wondering what you were like when you were a wee boy. Were you always kind of, I'm saying bolshy in a good way, did you always have a sense of the absurdity and injustice? And, you know, was a little boy like you are right now? Except with more hair.
Yeah, I had curly. I had curly hair, lots of curls. I think as a kid, I was hard. Right? So I was like, by the end of primary school, I was the hardest in my school, as we used to call it. I don't know if you call it that in Edinburgh. I don't know what you call it, right? I was the hardest in my school. But I was never but I was unusual because every kid in my school pretty much was from the working class estate, and I was virtually the only kid whose family owned their own home, right? So I just lived slightly outside. So normally the hardest kid in the school was the rough working class kid whose dad was in prison. Right, so the year above us, it was Darren Helliwell. Do you remember his name?
You always remember the name.
You do. And Paul Stoneman was second above, and he punched me in the face. And my brother, bless his heart, who was never particularly noteworthy of his age, he was a year older than me, but he went and punched Stumpy, as he was called, in the face, even though he knew he would get battered by doing it, right? I always remember that. Makes my heart weep, right? Lovely, right? Because I could almost, you know, I was a bit bigger than my brother, so it was always a tension. He's older, but I was actually a bit stronger than him, so that was a tension. So I think I was hard. We played out all the time. We battled all the time. We played sports all the time. But I also think but I think probably most kids that have this, but I had an intense belief in fairness. Right? If something wasn't fair, it appalled me, right? So I never threw my weight around. I hated anyone that did throw their weight around. And I always wanted people to speak. So I think I'm a really good mate, right? Because, like, you know, when you're sitting around and your mate's loud and you should say, all right, I like other people to have a say. I'm kind of like slightly conscious. I was saying to my daughter, sorry, this is a rambling answer, but I was saying to my daughter yesterday, there's a really sweet thing about my son. My son had a similar thing, I think, and I remember he did a nativity play at 6. He was about 6 years old, and he had some part, I can't remember what, and I was filming it, right, with my camera, I'm at the back, and of course I'm filming him, right, because I don't really care about the nativity. You just film your own son, don't you? It's like when you're on Zoom, you only look at yourself. You notice this? We're just narcissists. We're just narcissists. We can't help it. It's mental, isn't it? You just look at yourself, right? It's crazy stuff. But anyway, like people show you a group photograph, and the only thing you look at is you. Anyway, so there's my son, and I'm filming him. And he's not doing anything at the time, someone else is, and he's like this tiny little kid, and he's like pointing at me, he's going. Because he's trying to direct me, right? And it's like, so then the angel comes on or something, right? And then he's going. Because he doesn't want me filming him, he wants me getting the action, right? And he's like directing me to, and I thought, God, that's so sweet. You know, he's not wanting me. He wants you to actually fair play. So I think I had a really powerful sense of fair play, but I was also hard. So I think that's what I was like as a kid. I think another thing, sorry, I was just going to say, I'm also getting...
No epiphany then. It wasn't like you got to a stage and you thought, oh, I can see what's happening. All the way through your life, you had that sense of injustice.
Oh, I was a revolutionary communist, right? So I was left wing. I thought that, you know, and I think at the time probably rightly, that capitalism isn't a very fair system, and we need to overturn the system because we need people power. Of course, whether that works very well or not is, you know, open to debate. But when that possibility collapsed, I was just lucky enough to be around intelligent enough people to say, actually, not only, this isn't just a collapse of the possibility of a kind of working class solution. What is going to collapse now is any belief in humanity and the Enlightenment. And so Living Marxism was the magazine I used to sell, right? And from the early 90s, it started to focus on what is the Enlightenment, right? And I thought that was very clever, right? Because I'd never heard of the Enlightenment virtually. And now suddenly I'm reading about the Enlightenment and you're thinking, this is interesting. And the threat we now face is worse than what I think I used to look at as in terms of Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan or anything else. It's actually the emptying out of human civilization that we're facing at the minute. So that's the political trajectory. As a person, I think it's possibly the dimension of me being a tough, fair kid that was of relevance. But I was just going to say, I also think, just briefly, I don't want to drag it out too long, but I'm also, whether it happens or not, but there's a lad called Murray Allen. I don't know if you know this lad. This is the lad who was chucked out of his school in Aberdeen because he said that there's only two genders, as he called it. I think we should call them sexes, basically, get rid of that, just say two sexes. And he got thrown out of his class.
I saw your interview with him.
Aye. So that's Murray. So at the minute, and whether it happens or not, I don't know, but I'm trying to get him to create a film, or at least videos, which then we can make it a film. I'll probably just ask David to edit it for me. I haven't asked him yet. But a film where he talks to kids of his age, so he's like in his early 20s, because that's a voice you don't hear. When you get 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 21-year-olds saying, when I was at school, this garbage was happening, right? I have faced this pressure, right? Because he says the majority of people think like he does, right? That's what he says, right? Whether he's right or not, but he says most people think it's stupid, right? Most people think this is just nonsense. They're not into it, right? They're just not. And you never hear that, right? It's as if every young person is a trans activist, and it's clearly not true. So I think there's ways in, to different markets, TikTok and all that malarkey. So that's a possible thing as well, I think. Getting a bit of a youth voice going on this stuff.
Yeah, Stuart, I'm just wondering about the sort of what's the deeper kind of cultural trend underlying all this nonsense, and whether it's the the issue of sort of the increasing bureaucratization of society, and that we're sort of outsourcing like personal judgment, things like professional judgment, like the role of the teacher, the role of the doctor, to these sort of abstract systems and sort of machine logic, and like it seems to me that's part of the the transgender issue. It's like we're no longer able to sort of think about gender as a in sort of symbolic terms. It has to be like categorical. We think we're sort of, society is sort of moving us towards like thinking about people in categories, that are just like, there's no sort of room for a symbolic understanding of like gendered experience. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about what's.
Yeah, I think it's almost too big, and this probably won't be that useful. But so two things I think is that capitalism finds it hard to justify itself, and there's a reason it finds it hard to justify itself. It's because it's a profoundly uneven, unequal society, and that's difficult when you say that the ideals of the French Revolution and all the rest of it is like liberty, equality, fraternity, and so on, and you have actually an increasingly unequal society. And I think that's difficult. It's especially difficult when you end up having economic crisis, wars, a Holocaust, Hiroshima, and so on. Liberalism struggled to justify the founding principles of liberalism. And that's difficult, right? Because it means that and then when socialism collapsed, because when communism collapsed, the beliefs of liberalism and conservatism also started to collapse, because they built their strength on saying, we're not the Soviet Union, right? Not we believe in these principles, which are really great, right? They said, we're the free world. Look, I would talk to my students about it's like going out with your ugly mate, right? And you stand at a bar and there's some nice lass and you're thinking, right, I'm going to chat her up. And it's great because the only people there is you and your ugly mate, right? And so you look attractive because you've got this ugly guy standing next to you. Well, that was the Soviet Union for liberalism and capitalism, as they would say, they didn't justify themselves or develop their own arguments about what is good. They would just say, look at the Soviet Union, right? And that meant that the foundations and the ideas around liberalism and even aspects of conservatism just wilted, and they struggled, and they were not able to have any clear sense of meaning, which is why we have a vacuous, it's like Rishi Sunak is basically, he should be a bank clerk in NatWest, right? That's his level. Right, that is his level, right? That's what he is, right? And it's an absolute disgrace that he's become a prime minister, right? It's a joke. It's a complete joke. It's an embarrassment. And that's where you are. So exactly right. So technocratic, but the technocratic thing is because of the emptiness, right? It's they try and you have this managerial, technocratic, human resource world because they've lost everything else. The other dimension, which I think is possibly even harder, because I think we're all kind of part of it, is that we're all counterculture kids, right? And when we're counterculture kids, we're a little bit self-obsessed and narcissistic. And I think that's difficult, because I think we're all like that. I know I am, right? A little bit too hedonistic. I'll go back tonight, I'm going to have a little bit more to drink, I'm going to have a bit of a smoke. I might even watch some telly, even though I'm late, I'll stay up too late. This is just me, of course. But anyway, I think as a culture, we've become self-absorbed, and that's actually where the trans thing really stems from, is self-absorption, and a society that doesn't have values, that drags you out into the world, that makes you a genuinely public person. So I think you've got the two things, loss of meaning at a broad level, and this kind of narcissistic culture. I think they're the two big trends. That's why it's so difficult. Because it's not just, because if you think about it, the trans stuff is off the charts mad, right? It just is mad, right? 110 genders, you can be born in the wrong body. It's utterly bonkers, right? It doesn't make any sense. Maths, anti-racist, it doesn't make any sense, right? A lot of this stuff, it makes no sense, but there's obviously a wider cultural framework behind it, right? Which is much bigger. And I think that's part of the difficulty, which is why I think institutions, unions, organizations are important, because I think people getting together and learning to become a public is what needs to happen. Because at the minute we're not a public, we're just a group of individuals, right, who happen to turn up. But you need to become a public, which is a thing that is much more real, meeting with other people, being tolerant of other ideas, debates becoming normal, and so on. I think that's the cultural change that has to happen, because if that happens, I think lots of other things will just, all the crap will just fall away if you get a more vibrant public.
Okay. Can I just add a very quick comment, and thank you for your, as a head teacher, when this stuff was coming in, what I didn't do was just give a 2-word answer and say the second word is off. But I couldn't quite do it because, you're a head teacher and then people are respecting you and you've got your position. But I really want to think, I've just said it already in my first little comment, the audit class, there's a whole load of them. Local authority, quality assurance, there's care commission, there's inspectorate, there's all manners of them. They're just the enforcer class. If you would just engage with us, I've got 11 years of a website and it's beautiful. You can see what the kids are doing, but they won't engage with it. And that's all I want to say.
When I went to see Stuart speak, I'll stand up for this one. Stuart will like this. When I went to see Stuart speak in Dundee, he had a demo against him. And it was very loud and very colourful. And I couldn't wait to get in there. And I found a young man with a sign. He's standing proudly with a sign that said, "Stuart Waiton is a bigot." We had the sign. So I went up and I spoke to him. I said, "Do you know Stuart?" He said, No. I said, "Have you ever met Stuart?" He said, No, I've never met him. "How do you know he's a bigot?" He said, "Oh, he's written it down. He's published it. He's bigotry. In The Guardian." I had a hard job keeping a straight face. "Oh, really? What did they say?" So, 2 questions, Stuart. 1, what did you say in The Guardian? And 2, I gave you a photo. I gave you a copy of the photograph of the man with Stuart Waiton as a bigot sign. What did you do with it?
David's asking this, knowing what I did with it. I've never written for The Guardian, so I don't know where he got it from. So, made up. I wrote my first ever article for The Independent, which was actually an article when Prince Charles visited Easter House. And I went to Easter House because I was actually learning to be doing a thing on community education at the time, course in Jordan. I went to Easter House because I was doing a project on it. And I watched them arrive. So it was weird watching these pristine, beautifully thingied people land in Easter House with ordinary people who are not that pristine and so on. And it was about, anyway, I wrote an article for The Independent making a kind of comedic joke about Prince Charles going to Easter House. So I don't know what article he was talking about. But the photograph, Stuart Waiton as a bigot, which I'm sure you know, I used as for our Substack. So it was the front, our Substack, our newsletter, which you'll all be getting soon. I used the picture, Stuart Waiton, of him holding the Stuart Waiton as a bigot sign up and then write an article about it, because I just think it's funny. So I was quite proud of that photograph, so I thought it was very good. But that's just, it's part of the course. It's funny, and I know I'm too one-dimensional about this, but I think people are too soft about being monstered on Twitter and stuff. I want to be monstered on Twitter. I'm desperate to be monstered on Twitter because it'll mean I'm having an impact, right? I want, like J.K. Rowling, I want people to be saying transphobe, racist, bigot, fascist. I want to be called every name under the sun, and I want Twitter awash with it, right? And I think it's words, right? as long as I've still got my job, right? So that is debatable, but as long as I've still got my job, right? Bring it on, right? Bring it on. I even was a bit critical of Kathleen Stock, right? Kathleen Stock was getting hounded at her university for being a transphobe, and she resigned. I'm like going, you know, just don't resign, you know, don't. But I mean, she had options, and she writes for Unheard. Unheard's quite a good online publication. But don't resign, right? It's words, right? Let people call you names, right? Being sacked now, that's a different matter, right? But I think we just need to be a little bit tougher and be prepared. That's the job thing. Oh, the job thing's different, right? If they come after your job, then that's different. But if it's just a public slagging, then I think we've just got to deal with that, right? People call you names, so what, right?
If you get sacked, then it goes to the courts and then it gets thrown out because all the court cases are losing anyway.
It's true. That is true, actually. And even that, there's a truth to that as well. It's that I almost want my employer to come after me. If you're listening, employer, I don't really want you to. But I almost want them to, because I think unless I've done something weird, I think I might win, and I think I might become more of a name, and then I might be able to say, I'm doing this, this is important, this is why. So there's an element I think we just need to be take it on the chin, you know, take it on the chin. As long as you're not going to lose your job, and even if you are going to lose your job, you might get it back, but that is a risky one. But otherwise, I think people should be prepared to speak their minds more and stand up more and have courage, have proper values that are different to their values, right? Honour, courage, duty, things like this, values of strength. And that's maybe what could inspire kids, is they think, well, actually, you've got these values, but you've got these values. I think, actually, that's inspiring, whereas that's a bunch of crap.
So Stuart,